Let me begin. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for spending your Thursday evening with us. We're so glad to have you. And welcome. Welcome to the final conversation series. And we are excited about this final conversation series on the art of parent caregiver leadership in evolving times. There's no doubt that those are the times that we're in. And if you know the conversation series, we try to bring speakers and have conversations about the times that we're in, based on what we hear from parents and caregivers in terms of what they're interested in, what they want to learn about. So before we go any further, let's open our evening, shall we, with the reading of the land acknowledgement. We acknowledge we are hosted on the lands of the Mississaugas of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Wendat. We also recognize the enduring presence of all First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples. Thank you. All right, we're just asking this evening that we adhere to the TDSB's online code of conduct as we move throughout the evening. Just quick updates on our protocols for this evening. Chats will be closed. The Q&A will be open. So please feel free to drop comments, thoughts, ideas, any responses that I know our speaker tonight wants to hear from you. So please feel free to put responses and comments into the Q&A. The session this evening is being recorded, so we're asking that you do not record, screen capture, or share any of the information this evening. In agreement with the speaker this evening, she's actually agreed to share tools and resources with you this evening from her talk. And the intention of that is that the conversation will not stay in this room, that you'll be able to take it out of this space into your home, into school councils, into communities. So we've made arrangement, and the speaker has generously offered to provide you information for further growth and learning. So I just want to set out the quad of dialogue for our conversation this evening. And I'm going to honor this sharing from facing history on ourselves. And I want to position that we enter our conversation this evening with humility, curiosity, understanding, and empathy. Humility, simply just a stance of a non-superiority, which is just let's enter this in a space that I don't know everything, and every opportunity is an opportunity for learning, and every space is a space of growth. Let's enter this evening with curiosity, with a stance of questioning and imagination. And what that says is, we're entering with, how can I understand and help me to understand? And then it moves nicely into understanding, which really talks about granting each other grace, space, compassion, and generosity, and that we allow each other the space to express ourselves in a way that doesn't harm others, but also with empathy, which is just a stance of connection and working to understand and hear another's perspective in a way without judgment. So I'm asking that you enter this space with these 4 areas of stance and engage throughout the evening in this way. All right, so those who are joining the series for the first time, and it is the last one, but I still want you to have a sense of what it's about. So it brings together insightful speakers, keynotes from various parts of the city and beyond. And we create an environment where complex, challenging issues can be explored, where minds are challenged, pushed, and it's built on the belief that meaningful conversation is a catalyst for change, and that dialogue is an art practiced across diverse boundaries, right? This is our second one for this year and our last. So it is open to parents and caregivers across our board, but staff are also, and the larger community is welcome to join us. So without further ado, let me move to introducing our speaker for this evening. Sophia Alexandra Bishop, well known throughout the community, very active. She's a leadership advisor, speaker, author, entrepreneur, and the founder of the Succeed Institute, where she works with leaders and communities on the practical demands of leading well, including difficult conversations, strained relationships, and institutional pressures that rarely appear in leadership manuals. Sophia's work is grounded in the conviction that leadership is shaped from within, and that how a person governs themselves under pressure determines how effectively they can service people and communities. As the creator of the Succeed framework, which you will be learning a bit about this evening, for self-governance, Sophia's worked with Durham District School Board, Durham Catholic School Board, Durham Regional Police, the City of Toronto, facilitating, leading conversations, and helping people work through difficult situations, and supporting leaders navigating complex interpersonal and institutional dynamics. In addition to all of that, she's an author, multiple works on leadership and self-governance, including Succeed. So without further ado, Toronto District School Board, I really want to welcome Sophia Bishop. Sophia, welcome to the Toronto District School Board. We look forward to hearing from you this evening.
Thank you so very much, Michelle. It is my honor and pleasure to be here. I am really looking forward to engaging with all of those who are present this evening in talking about how do we move through, how do we move through leadership effectively during times of change and challenge. And that's certainly what we are experiencing now. And I'm being deliberate about the word effective leadership because regardless what's happening, there is leadership happening. And for me, I want us to really look at how do we do that effectively. And so we're here as a group. There is certainly the collective, but much of what we're going to be going through this evening, I would like you to really look at self. Much of this is asking for us to look at how we show up. What are our needs? What are our blind spots? What do we need in order to be effective? So I am going to be sharing with you some of the work, as Michelle had mentioned, the Succeed framework being one of them, and helping to guide us through doing the best that we can in an impactful and effective way, not at the expense of self, because oftentimes it comes with that, but in being able to stay intact while still being effective as change is happening around us and through us, and sometimes because of us. So I welcome your commentary in the Q&A and really look forward to the next hour and a half as we share this time. Michelle has outlined, and I love the words that were used about how we show up in the space as we are engaging. And time is the most precious asset that we have. So I want to just build on that to say, yes, as we are here, let us really just be mindful and be here in the now, being present with what is being shared, what you will hear from me, what we will be hearing from others, and making sure we're truly pouring into ourselves so that we can be filled up as we pour out into others. So our session is going to be about leadership during times of uncertainty and change and tension and transition. It's about leadership as a lived experience, whether as a parent in our personal lives, in our professional lives, how are we showing up? And for many parent leaders and caregivers who are trying to navigate strong emotions, difficult conversations, and just changing systems, competing expectations, and just a genuine concern and care for our communities, we want to create a space here that we can engage in some very thoughtful reflection, some critical examination. So being willing to go deeper, go beyond the surface, and to have some meaningful engagement with each other when we talk about whatever the leadership tensions are that may arise in communities and what we're currently navigating. So our next slide. We're talking about one of the lines lifted from leadership through change. It's for me, a reflection piece that's written for tonight's session. So when we talk about leadership during certainty, it's not the absence of emotion. It's actually the governance of emotion in service of our purpose. And that distinction matters because emotion is not the problem. People, we care deeply. We come with frustrations. We get exhausted. We feel unheard at times. We worry about what may be lost. But leadership, effective leadership, is asking a different question. We're asking what governs that response to the emotions and the things that are happening, because we know that emotions can certainly inform leadership or emotion can consume leadership. And the communities know the difference. The people on the receiving end of this certainly know the difference. So I would like to welcome you to the talk table. The evening is designed for a space of thoughtful reflection and examination, and it's a space where ideas can be examined and the leadership tensions that are existing can be explored thoughtfully. And other perspectives, other than our own, can be considered. And I invite you to really think critically about leadership during this period of uncertainty and change. And I welcome you, invite you with that reflection to share it in the Q&A, or when the session is done, as was mentioned earlier, that you can actually engage with some of the tools that I've made available for you to do the personal reflection for where you're at, where you would like to go, and what it is that you need to do in order to get there. Destabilization is information. One of the most important reframes during difficult periods is understanding that destabilization serves as information. It tells us what people value. It tells us what people fear losing, what tensions already exist beneath the surface, and what communities are truly trying to protect. So the question is not just about whether the tension exists, it's the question about whether people can engage that tension constructively. So oftentimes we're feeling, the sense of powerlessness, right? One of the greatest leadership challenges during uncertainty is just the feeling of, I can't do anything, or I am severely compromised. And especially when leadership becomes measured by only what we don't feel we can control. And one of the greatest leadership mistakes during uncertainty is just truly exhausting ourselves, fighting only what we don't feel we can actually control, while neglecting some of the places where influence still matters very deeply. During periods of instability, this is when people oftentimes we become consumed. We become consumed by the decisions that cannot be reversed. We become consumed by systems that cannot immediately change, or timelines that we can't control, and the outcomes that really remain, for the most part, very uncertain. And while those concerns are legitimate, they're real, leadership can become really depleted when all of our emotional energy is concentrated only on what feels unreachable. Effective leadership will require that we ask ourselves a different question. What is the influence we still have? Where does influence still exist? Because even though there's a great deal of uncertainty, leaders still influence, right? How people feel in the presence of leadership, how conversations, how you're controlling them or how they're unfolding, whether the tension escalates or stabilizes, or whether we feel heard, whether the people we're speaking to feel heard, whether the relationships can remain intact. These are all areas that we still influence, whether communication becomes reactive or thoughtful, and whether communities remain emotionally anchored during this period. As leaders, these are places we still do have influence, especially during difficult times when we're needed most. So, this is why effective leadership will require the discipline to identify where communication and advocacy and participation and thoughtful engagement can still create very meaningful impact. Not every form of influence changes, policy immediately, right? Long before policies get changed where we're seeing it, there are decisions that are changing, there are tensions that are fully, resolved, there are leadership that's already influencing the emotional and the relational climate of the people around us. It's still shaping whether fear or, you know, being steady, if that's what's contagious. It's still shaping whether our conversations remain constructive or whether they devolve into that destructive place. It still shows whether trust is strengthened or whether it's weakened. So people may not always, as Maya Angelou would say, remember every position a leader took during times of uncertainty or challenges, but they will remember how they felt. They will remember how the communication went when they were under pressure. They will remember what escalated or what got to stabilize so we can bring it down. They will remember, who got listened to thoughtfully and how they felt during those times. So that is why leadership influence cannot just be measured by the immediate outcomes, right? Leadership is often still shaping culture and trust and participation. And there's an emotional climate that's actually still emerging while all of the shifts are taking place. So we need to make sure we are mindful of that and not thinking that, well, that's it, because we're still shaping. Things are still evolving for us. So we talk about periods of uncertainty and how crippling they can be, where you just, it's like you've got paralysis, where we just sit around and we're waiting, right? We're waiting, for clarity. We're waiting for certainty. We're waiting for the guarantees. We're waiting for permission to be able to move forward because everything feels just so unsettling. But uncertainty is not permanent. It's not a reason for us to not act. We cannot allow that to become permanent inaction. So, what we will need to do, and when we talk about effective leadership, it requires thoughtful movement. We still need to go forward before perfect, before being able to get the results, we need to help to shape the results. So, Martin Luther King had said, faith is taking the first step before seeing the whole staircase. And we need to remind ourselves of that. We need to still take that step. We still need to keep going despite what is happening around us and the fact that we don't have all the answers. We don't know what is coming next. We still need to take that step and believe that we will be okay. We will have what we need in order to keep moving. So our next slide is talking about the Succeed framework, which was referenced earlier. This is talking about self-governance for effective leadership, because as we are, so shall we lead. And so at the center of the framework for self-governance and effective leadership is the idea that we need to govern what's happening internally. how people regulate themselves, how we communicate, how we think, how we restore ourselves, how we exercise discipline. These things matter deeply for us, especially during difficult times. So let's go through and just look at what those 7 practices are that's going to be helping us when we are being deliberate about them to really get through our leadership in a way that remains impactful and remains something that does not just deplete us or sacrifice self. So the first one is actually a mnemonic, so it spells the word succeed. So the first part is to select your circle and your style. The leadership is never ever going to be shaped in isolation. It is being influenced by the people that we're listening to, the people that we're trusting, who we spend our time with, who we spend our time around, the environments that we normalize, all of that, the forms of communication and behavior, all of those reinforce our leadership and who we are in real time. So this selection becomes important governance, selecting the people. And that includes not only the people, but also how we present ourselves. I like to call it the style, how we're communicating, the tone, our leadership presence. And oftentimes, style will get dismissed as, that's superficial or it's not that important. But style actually communicates before we even open our mouths to say anything. It signals our judgment, our awareness, our confidence. A lot has gone into socializing us to reading particular signals based on how we show up. So leadership influence is going to be shaped not only by what people say, but what people consistently communicate through presence, through their engagement, through the behavior. So during difficult periods, it is extremely important that we are governing what is visible through our tone, through how we show up in our communication discipline, and just how we conduct ourselves in general, that particular style when tensions rise. The next piece of this is the you in understanding yourself. And this to me is the critical piece. It's all very important, but self-awareness is one of the most important leadership disciplines during uncertainty because people cannot effectively govern responses that they don't recognize. If we don't recognize it, what are we going to be able to do in shaping it and determining how we handle it? Periods of tension, it's always an area where we're going to be exposing our emotional trigger, the things that set us off. It will expose our fears. What are we afraid of? What do we not want to happen? It's going to expose our assumptions, all of the assumptions that we make about people, about situations. It's going to expose our communication habits. How do we come across? What tone are we using? What's the content? It's going to expose our stress responses and just patterns that people may not normally notice when we are going through challenging times, when there are changes happening. It's going to show. So some people during challenging times or when they're feeling backs against the wall, we may feel, very reactive, like just we will pounce. We're just going to react to whatever is happening. Emotions are raw. We will, for some, withdraw, where we go into ourselves and we become silent, not wanting to say much. We can over explain things. We may escalate things, or we may just avoid the conflict entirely. Understanding what our personal tendencies are will matter because leadership pressure amplifies all of these habits. And governed leadership requires that we understand ourselves, that we understand how we respond under stress, that we understand what stabilizes us, what makes us feel that we are centered. We understand what restores us. We understand the patterns that will strengthen and weaken our effectiveness. So understanding self is a key piece in governing ourselves, especially during times of change and challenge. And the next one, C, for cultivating your curiosity. And this was mentioned earlier when Michelle invited us to make sure we're engaging our curiosity as we take in and we listen and participate this evening. Curiosity is one of the most underdeveloped leadership disciplines that we have during conflict and uncertainty. When tensions rise and people, tend to just move very, very quickly towards, that area of certainty. I know this, right? I'm going to assume this. I'm going to become very defensive. It's a time where it really does show up, right? We're quick to jump to conclusions. Having curiosity slows the reaction, right? Curiosity will ask, what may I not have understood about this moment, about what is happening? What concerns may actually be driving the response that I'm seeing? Where's that coming from? What assumptions can be shaping this very conversation that we're having? What is this person saying? What's happening in the backdrop? What tensions exist beneath the position that's being expressed? Curiosity, it will not necessarily ask for agreement, but what it's doing for it's creating the space that we need for the examination. It's creating the space that we need for the understanding, for the reflection, and for us to just become more constructive in that engagement. So employing curiosity is extremely, extremely important during times of change and challenge. And the next one, C, the second one, is committing to what I call braver goals. And it's very important as we're going through changes and challenging times that we set goals for ourselves for how we are going to be managing for what's coming next. That's what gives us a sense of control and direction. So braver goals are pursued with more courage, more discipline and self-awareness and just some intentionality. And the idea for me was inspired by the story of Icarus, because we're always talking about, don't fly too high, right? That's usually when I've heard that being used, right? Because what's going to happen when you get your wings burnt? What's not often shared is that there's another part to that original lesson. It wasn't just don't fly too high. The other part of the instruction was don't fly too low. Leadership requires that blend. I'm not going to say balance because I didn't, it implies this perfect 50-50. It's a blend. It's about not being reckless. It's about not having a fear-based retreat where I'm going to pull into myself. But it's also about having governed courage, the courage to step up, the courage to stay in, the courage to not retreat into ourselves. Leaders are called for being braver in the goals that are setting. Set those brave goals so that you can be your most effective self, right? So what is that, the braver? So we're talking about bold leadership. The B in that is stretching yourself beyond your comfort level, because growth often requires people to participate when, it might feel a lot safer to be silent, to engage when the conversations, are difficult, that we still show up and we're thoughtful in that, for us to advocate responsibly, right? Especially in this time, and to move forward even when certainty doesn't really exist. We don't know what's coming next, right? Boldness is asking us to govern our actions under pressure. So make those goals bold, step out. The R in braver goals is the realistic piece of it, which we often hear about, making our goals realistic. It's understanding the limitations and the context and the capacity and the consequences for what is happening right now. So leadership in being realistic in the goals that we're setting, it's not about being pessimistic. It's just about making sure that it is governed. We're setting those goals and we understand those parameters so that we can manage them. And the A in Braver Gold is about adaptability. Adaptable leadership allows us to pivot, with purpose in mind instead of simply abandoning direction entirely. And sometimes when we're faced with the changes, when we're faced with the challenges, there's that instinct to I'm out of here, right? During the periods of uncertainty and change, it requires us to really just reassess and to recalibrate and to modify the strategy. It's asking us to remain responsive to the changing conditions without losing that sense of purpose, right? What is this about? Let's keep that in mind, right? Why am I here? What am I doing? So setting those goals, it's allowing us as we move through to make sure that we're able to stay adaptable. And the next one, the V in Braver, is values aligned. Values aligned leadership chooses those goals that remain connected to the principle, right? Our integrity, the purpose. Don't lose sight of the values, right? During difficult periods, we're going to be tested for what we prioritize. We're going to be tested in terms of the ethics. We're going to be tested in terms of how we're able to show up consistently and the emotional discipline that we have when everything around us just seems to be going in a place of, I don't know what's coming next, but I need to keep moving. It's at this time we need to make sure the values stay front and center with the goals that we're setting to help us to move through, because values help our leadership to remain anchored, especially when the pressure is increasing. The next one with the goals that I'm inviting you to set will be E for energized. Energized leadership understands the importance of restoration, right? Filling up. It appreciates the importance of the reflection, of refinement, of recalibration. Leadership, when we are exhausted, it's going to affect our judgment. It's going to affect how we communicate. It's going to affect how we just regulate the varied emotions, sometimes conflicting ones, that we have to manage. And it's also going to be regulating how we're able to engage. So we need to be able to be energized in order to move through at these difficult and uncertain times. And sustainable leadership is going to require that intentional restoration and energy be in place for what we're doing. And the braver part of this, the last piece, is the R for review. Review-centered goals in our leadership means that we are examining the results that we're getting. And in real time, not waiting for too long to do that, checking in frequently. How are we doing? We're reviewing our behavior. We're reviewing the assumptions that we're making on this journey and in dealing with what's happening. We are reviewing communication, how we're showing up for that and our impact. So the goals that we're setting, the plans that we're going to be, moving forward, we are reviewing them to make sure they are what they're supposed to be. So the review is creating the space for us to make the adjustment, for the learning, for all of the, governed actions that we need to take as we're going forward, because effective leadership, it's not just about the action that we're taking, right? It's also the willingness to do that particular examination. It's the willingness to refine and to improve or change how things are being exercised. So braver goals remind us that effective leadership, especially during times of uncertainty, requires both the ambition, the aspirations, and the governance that goes with that. So we're not flying too high to not be able to handle it. We're not flying too low, right? We're making sure we're flying in a way that's truly braver. The next E in succeed is about exercising self-care. It's about understanding that leadership exhaustion will change who we are. It will change how we show up. It changes how we're going to speak to people, whether we have the bandwidth for that conversation. It impacts our patience. It impacts the energy that I just spoke about and how we're able to regulate the emotions, the moods, and all of the different things that are going to be impacting us. It shows up in how we listen. It's about our boundaries and the bandwidth that we have. So I know a lot of times we talk about, depletion, and oh, I'm so exhausted. And there's a part of our society where we actually wear it almost like a badge of honor to show that, we are committed. But effective leadership without the restoration piece just doesn't work well in being effective. It truly becomes fragile where we show up and we're not going to be very effective at all. So we need to make sure that we're filling up, right? We need to make sure we're understanding those boundaries, what we're saying yes to and what we're saying no to. Oftentimes, we say a whole lot more of no's to ourselves and yes to others, taking on things that if we just give ourselves the space and time to go, not right now, to understand, to recognize that I can't put more on because it will lessen how well I can show up, right? So emotionally exhausted leadership becomes reactive leadership. So we're talking about looking at self-care as understanding that it's very much about how we maintain our leadership in an effective way. It's about requiring the protection of our emotional capacity. It's about understanding that we need to take care of our physical well-being and the ability to just make sure we're being thoughtful about ourselves when we're going through this pressure so that we'll be able to do the same for others. And the other E is to elevate our self-talk and conversations. And this is huge. The conversations that we have internally will shape the conversations that we're having externally. It all starts with self. So we know for a fact that periods of uncertainty, the challenge when we don't know what's coming next, we know that that can intensify the internal talk that brings about fear, where we're afraid of things and we're operating from that place. Our internal talk, we magnify things, we catastrophize, right? So everything becomes larger than life. As they would say, make a mountain out of a molehill. Our resentment for things, that internal talk, it just becomes magnified where, we become very suspicious, and then we can start to read things into situations, and so a lot of the negative feelings can actually start to emerge through our self-talk. And so we have to elevate that. We have to ensure that the self-talk, what we're saying to ourselves, will not be setting us up to be reactive, will not be setting us up to not succeed, right? Because whatever we're thinking, whatever the internal dialogue is, right? As I like to say, Tiffany and I, we think it, then we're going to feel it, then we are going to act on whatever that feeling is. So the internal dialogue that we know, it's going to be affecting our tone, it's going to be affecting our behavior, it's going to be affecting the assumptions that we make. So I am showing up here today, and my internal dialogue is either going to set me up to think, oh my gosh, this is not going to go well. You know what? People are going to come in here, they're going to be tired or they're going to be upset, and they have their own agenda. If that's what I'm telling myself when I show up here, I am going to be acting that out. I am going to be defensive. It's almost like that self-fulfilling prophecy, right? That whatever we think becomes the thing, right? If we think we are going to succeed, we are. If we think we're not, we are. We're going to be right regardless with whatever that internal message is. So it is extremely important that our understanding is there, that the leadership requires our awareness, not only of what people are saying, but what we are saying ourselves, and for how we're showing up in other conversations, right? what we're saying, what we're thinking, what goes in, then shapes what it is that I'm going to be saying to you. It's going to shape how it is that I am reacting to you. So it's going to be very important that we elevate not just the self-talk, but our talk with others, the spaces that we enter into. How are we contributing to that conversation? And also, what are those conversations doing for us, right? It goes right back to surrounding ourselves with the right people, because the conversations that we're having, the conversations that we're a part of, is going to be shaping our leadership, because it's shaping who we are, it's shaping how we are showing up. So elevate the conversations that we're participating in, elevate what we say to ourselves, and elevate what we're saying to others. Engage that curiosity before we speak, and be aware of what those around us, what they are saying, and whether or not we want to be a part of that conversation, right? And if we're going to be a part of it, ensuring that it's serving us well and our contribution to it is serving our leadership well. It's helping us to be more effective, because we know that language is going to be shaping our emotional state and our behavior internally and externally. And the last part for succeed, the practice that we need to ensure that we're governing for ourselves as leaders, is to develop our self-discipline. Self-discipline is what actually allows the principles to remain operational during difficult times. It's a self-discipline that will allow all of those practices that we just mentioned to actually work. It's a discipline that we need in order to pause before we react, or to think critically under pressure. It's a self-discipline we need to really act in a way that will preserve our credibility and help us to remain connected to what's truly purposeful and the things that matter to us, even when emotions are rising. So the leadership discipline becomes very visible, as we know, during times of uncertainty. So we are going to need to call on the self-discipline. We're going to be needing to practice that so that we can show up in ways that are going to be consistent, that we can show up in ways that will showcase well for our restraint, our emotional governance, the way that we execute. And the most important question that's really being asked of us during, periods of uncertainty and difficulty is, what is your governed response in this moment? What does it require from us? Right? So as we show up with our self-governance, how are we actually making sure it's serving us well? So that is the important piece for us as we go on about self-governance during times of uncertainty. So we have the response framework, right? What outcome do I want? What is my current state? Yeah, what's my state of mind, right? This is all a part of the self-governance. What response in this moment will strengthen my influence? What response will risk my credibility? So let me be very thoughtful about that, right? Because the governed response framework will ask you as a leader to look at the emotional state, look at the consequences for whatever the behavior is going to be before responding. So just asking those few questions will make a difference in how we are going to be reacting during times of difficulty. It's what's going to strengthen our leadership. So that governance matters. As I said earlier, systems, build systems that will help us to really be the best of ourselves, especially as we're leading through challenging or changing times. Now, we mentioned it earlier, I mentioned it earlier about the importance of energy and restoration. It is actually a leadership discipline, because exhaustion, as was pointed out before, will actually impact our bodies, our communication, all aspects. So a leader who cannot sustain self will not be able to support others in the way that they need to. So restoration, I can't say it enough, taking time to make sure we're not running on empty, we're filling up becomes very, very important. And I know I'd mentioned it when I talked about self-care. And a lot of times I think of self-care as an event. I'm going to get my nails, then I'm going to go hang out with my buddies just for today or go to this particular event. Restoration and self-care, being a discipline, is about really being mindful daily in how we are filling up, the boundaries that we need to be putting in place to protect self. That is a leadership discipline and not something that, as we oftentimes treat it, it's optional. We will give, 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 give. We will pour out, pour out, pour out, but we're not pouring in. I am inviting you to ensure that you are being deliberate about scheduling the restoration piece for what is needed and understanding what that looks like for you. What does restoration look like for you? How do you keep that energy going so that you are well? And in all of this, the changes that are happening now in this landscape, it's very important that we understand, what is this all about? It comes back to our purpose. Why are we doing what we're doing? Because understanding that plays a key role in us being able to show up and function at our best. During emotionally charged periods, a conversation can really get away from what truly matters, and we find ourselves in the weeds. We find ourselves taking on things and going down a direction that does not serve us well. So, we're looking away from the thing that we're really supposed to be focused on. And so I am inviting you as a leader in our capacity, in our leadership, to say, what is this about and what matters most? One of the simplest but most important questions that we can ask is this moving us forward? In this case, is this helping our students? Is this going to be furthering the agenda that we have in mind for them to be at their best? And just take a moment and just ask, does this forward the experience of our students, of our children, of the future that we are basically training and molding? Is it serving us well? Is this the right thing? Leadership in difficult times, it's really emotionally comfortable. When there's going to be change, when we're navigating rough waters, it's difficult. And communities do not move through difficult seasons accidentally, right? They move through them because individuals, the leaders, continue with the thinking and the engaging and the listening and the reflecting, all of those things, asking the thoughtful questions, even when the conversation, I'll say, especially when the conversation becomes difficult, it's important that we are remaining connected, that we are remaining true to the practices that I've just mentioned to keep ourselves filled up so that we can show up in an impactful and effective way. So I've said a lot there, and I want us to just think on one of the most important realities of leadership. Some of the most influential people in our communities will actually not hold formal titles at all. And I want to encourage a conversation right now where you can just put it in the chat. Let me know what you're thinking on this. The think up conversation is what I want us to stop and take a minute to ponder. What do I mean by a think up conversation? I'm going to just ask you for a moment to think about this. There are statements that are made that could be strongly for or strongly against. And I want you to say whether or not you agree or disagree with the statement and why. So the idea is for us to just take it a bit deeper, right? I've said a lot. I want us to just stop for a moment and there's so much chatter, there's so much going on, around us all the time that we are talking, we're engaging, but not always in a way that takes us to the next level. So whether we're responding to the latest, social media commentary where people are telling us what to think and we kind of just go down that rabbit hole and go with it, I want us to take some time to really just think about taking our positions on things to another level so that we're understanding why we are thinking the things that we actually think, why we believe them. So I want us to ponder this statement for a moment. The think up statement is most effective leaders don't have titled power, they have informal authority. So I want you to think about that for a minute and tell me where you're landing. One reason that someone might agree with the statement is because they think that trust and credibility often shape influence more than positions alone. And I want you to think on this and just to see where you land. The reason why this matters is because when things are tumultuous, when things are getting really hectic for us, when we start to feel that we're not being heard, when we're operating in a place where we feel, well, mutual trust is missing, where we feel credibility is being questioned, when we think, where is this going, right? It creates this kind of a destabilization that I mentioned earlier. It's important for us to really think about where true power lies, because we can be made to feel that we don't have any in this moment. We don't know, we're not functioning from a place of strength where we know what we can actually do that will continue to be effective. So it becomes, if I don't hold formal authority, what then can I do? So I wanted to stop for a moment and just think about where you land on that. A leader without formal authority can be much more effective than a leader with power. Is that just hogwash? Are the people who will say, yes, that is true, being blinded by the reality of how power functions in our society? Or is it truly the case that a lot of power does not get assigned a formal title, and we actually have more power in the relationships that we have, in the touch points that we have in our community with people? Is it the case that we may be overlooking, especially in times like this, where true power actually exists? So take a moment and just reflect on that. A leader without formal authority can be much more effective than a leader with power. And where do you land
Yeah.
it?
So,
Yes?
Sophia, because we are an intimate group, I'm going to encourage anyone who would like to share, just put your hands up and we'll open the mic. And if you're comfortable, then you can respond directly, openly to the question and share your reflection with us.
Oh, perfect. Yes. So yeah, let me hear. I'd love to hear. What are the thoughts on that? And I mean, and there are strong arguments for, and there are strong arguments against both positions. Where does true power lie? Is it really the ones that, they're hired into these positions and, can say what goes, what stays, what does not? They will be the ones that can be truly impactful, as opposed to those who don't really have that formal title. Where do you land on that? What do you need, especially in this climate, in order to be effective? Are you effective without the formal title? Where does the true power lie? And I'm going to think on that. I think about just in workplaces in general, or even going to school. We think about our school environment and young people, and there's that person that you might have the leader, the manager with the formal title, then you've got the person who everyone goes to that person. They can sway a room, they can, regardless of whatever plans are being put in place, we need that person's buy-in in order for us to truly get anywhere because they hold the power. Is that something where we think of it, when we put it on a larger scale? Does that happen today in the same way, given the climate that we're moving through and where the power centers exist? Or
So we're
is it,
seeing a few hands, Sophia.
yes.
So Margaret, we have
Yep.
Juliana who was first.
Yep, I can let Juliana talk. Go ahead, Juliana. I've opened your mic up. You can unmute yourself, Juliana.
Okay. Hi. Um, I'm sorry. Is there an echo?
Yes.
Okay, let me fix that. How about move on to someone else and I'll come back to me later.
Okay. There is a question in the Q&A. Would you like me to read that, Michelle, or do you want to read it?
No, please go ahead.
Okay, this question is from Corey. Leadership does not come from someone's title role. It comes from someone's actions and words. That's a statement by Corey. What do you think, Sophia?
So could you say that again? You cut out for a moment, please.
Sure, no problem. Leadership does not come from someone's title or role. It comes from someone's actions and words.
Yeah, well, I am going to say, in actual fact, it does come from your action. I do agree with that. But there's a tension that exists because, and that's why I always like to use the word effective leadership, because everything is leadership. Is it poor leadership, good leadership, effective leadership? Yes, certainly does come from what it is that you say and what it is that you do. But that's just a qualifier for the kind of leadership that you are. Because at the end of the day, which is what this question is getting to for us to explore it, if we do not have the powers that be to truly move things, are we saying that we can still be impactful? Is that leadership? If my actions cannot move something or change something, what is that? And if someone does have a position of power, they do have a title, regardless of what we may think of their actions or even the lack thereof, they're still a leader and it is still impactful. So this is where it does matter. So leadership, yes, it is definitely about the title, because if you've got the title, it means that somewhere it has been bestowed upon you to impact other people, to impact situations and circumstances. So the very title itself bestows upon that person something. How they execute it, that's a different story in terms of the action itself. But I do agree that the behavior, the way that we move through, certainly is what can define there is a leader for you, regardless of the title or not. That person is acting as a leader and is influencing and impacting others and outcomes.
Sophia, can I just say that your video's gone off? Did you know that?
Oh, no, I did not.
Okay. I don't see anybody else with their hand. Oh, Juliana's back. Hold on. I will let Juliana talk. Okay, Juliana, you can unmute yourself. There we go, Sophia, you're back.
Okay.
Oh, you're
Yeah.
gone again.
Okay, hi. Yeah, I think that regarding this question, I learned something very early through my first parent council experience this year, is that it's how you approach, I think, the partnership between the parent and the school. I think I witnessed someone come in really just maybe untrustworthy, maybe thinking that they didn't have power, but I think they might have misjudged, that there is a desire for a real partnership between, school faculty and parents. And because I found that, if I, approached, the school in a way where it's like, let's come to a solution to, do something great for the kids, I found that, it was very responsive, and it's been a really great experience working with the school. But I don't know if everybody is open-minded in that way. So there was some challenges, but so I don't think that, one person has authority. I think it's just how you approach and, communicate.
No, and thank you for that. You're quite right. But how we show up, it does make the difference, right? And this is what we're talking about as well, because it is a two-way street. So when we're showing up in spaces based on whatever the lived experience has been, based on what our reality is now, we're going to be making particular assumptions, and so we show up with those assumptions in tow. And so when we're talking about being in the positions as leaders, it's ensuring that we are clear on what it is that we're expecting, and we go in not assuming the worst, but looking for the opportunities as well for how are we going to make this happen, because that is going to be shaping a lot of how we're also experienced on the other end. And in terms of how we're receiving others, it comes back to that piece as well about being open, and understanding is the empathy part that got mentioned earlier as well, right? In how we are going to be receiving people. So as leaders, showing up in a space where we're not going to be tentative, where we're going to be clear on what it is that we would like to get out of this, and then to be able to communicate that, and to communicate it in an honest and open way. Here's what I'm expecting, here's what I'm hoping for, and being comfortable to be able to say if something is going in a way that we are not agreeing with, to be able to voice that. Or if something is not happening and we think it ought to be happening, be able to voice that as well, and not from a place of I am going to retreat or feel small, but to say what I have to say, the way that I am representing matters, and to give voice to that. Am I back on screen? I'm just wondering, are you able to?
You did flash on for a moment, Sophia, but you're gone again. There you go. You're back.
It's back. Okay, I'm not sure what's happening there. Yeah, but thank you, Margaret, for sharing that. Any other thoughts on that?
We have another comment in the Q&A. The comment is from Ricardo. Power fails to recognize opportunities as the focus is on control rather than buy-in. The lack of formal authority forces leaders to greater collaboration and innovation.
Okay, so can you say that again for me?
Sure.
Please?
Power fails to recognize opportunities as the focus is on control rather than buy-in. The lack of formal authority forces leaders to greater collaboration and innovation.
Oh, wow. Okay. So the idea that we're going to be forced into collaboration with those opportunities, I think when you have power, the way that we wield the power does make a difference. Absolutely. And so when we have power, we will have more at our disposal formally that we can call on. I think the other piece of that that you're mentioning is, what does power look like? Because I think oftentimes when we don't have the formal title that will go with the power, we might not realize just how much we do still have power to influence and power to impact. And yes, in those spaces, oftentimes when the formal part isn't there, people do tend to be more collaborative. People do tend to have a sense of other and let me connect with you in order to get done. So we are able to, I guess, step away from what can be the false security or the arrogance that can come with formal power, to say it's going to be done this way, which can also come with a downside because it's what we know, it's what we've always done, so we will continue it. Or if we're feeling we don't have it, we work a bit harder and we find other creative ways and we reach out to really bring others into the fold and not just go on the me trip, but truly start to collaborate and embrace others and hear other ways of doing and being and exercising influence where others are concerned. So I absolutely appreciate that point.
All right, shall we move to the next slide, Sophia?
Yes,
Just
please.
cognizant of time.
Oh, you've gone off screen again,
I'm
Sophia.
I'm not seeing you. Sorry.
There
Are
we
you
go.
seeing me here?
Yes, I am now. Yes.
Okay. Okay. So can you just tell me the number, because I'm not seeing on my side,
Sure.
unfortunately.
Number 15. Do you agree or disagree on why?
The number that were on there. Okay. So this is a think up slide number 2, number 16. That effective leadership during change is less about what we can make happen and more about what we can prevent from being lost.
So Margaret, go to the next slide, please.
Okay. And Sophia, you've gone off screen again.
What's happening?
So while Sophia sorts that out, folks, any thoughts on the question on screen?
Yeah, so effective leadership during change is less about what we can make happen and more about what you can prevent from being lost. Yeah, what are your thoughts about that? Do you agree or disagree? Because this is about how we look at leadership and what we look at when things are changing and the positions that we find ourselves in. Is it more about trying to retain what there is, or is it about trying to prevent the loss that we envision or we see happening and responding to that? What are the thoughts on that? Right, so there's some who may feel that we should be focused on protecting what there is. So as a leader, you're looking at how can I protect the relationships? How can I bring stability and to hold on to what is here? It's about the credibility and focusing energies there. And then there are others who will say, no, it's about really moving forward more aggressively on creating change and pushing transformation forward. What do you think during times of change and challenging as a leader for yourself? What do you find that you go towards mostly? Is it putting your energy into maintaining what is, or do you have the bandwidth and the space to say, no, let me look elsewhere outside? Where do you land on that? Right? So what are the communities trying to protect? Should we focus more on preservation or transformation? Or,
Well, that depends, would it not? Would it not depend on the change and the nature of the change and the type of change? Because there are times when the change, actually, there are things that probably needs to be lost. So we don't want to prevent it because we want it to transition. No?
I would say yes. The question for me becomes, because there's a place where we tend to, as leaders, where we land. So when we're having things that are being changed around us, what is the mindset that we come to that with? Are we coming to it with the mindset, like you're asking the question, you're saying, well, it depends. Is that the mindset we're coming to it with generally in our default position, where I am open to seeing what is best, that this change may actually serve us well? And so I will ask the right questions and see how I can help with that particular change. Or as a leader, my landing more in the area of this has been good and I am going to protect this. And so my energy will go more towards keeping what's in place in place. Are we giving ourselves enough time, enough space in order to truly consider that? And what is the downside if we don't? So that is what the question is inviting, or that particular reflection. Where are we landing on how we decide where we will put our energies in that fight and how we are receiving the change that's coming about, or that we view to be in place, to preserve or to transform, right? So whatever we're looking at, we can see that argument where we had to say with AI and with that coming in place. Where are we landing as individuals and leaders so that we understand where we want to put our energy? We are giving it the examination that it truly deserves in order to know how we want to use our energy.
Margaret, please open Nico's mic. Nico's hand is up.
Hello. Thank you.
Hello.
It's Nicole here. I think I personally kind of agree with Michelle. It depends on what kind of change, especially if you have been in a situation to be able to judge. Personally, I feel like in a lot of latest changes, I feel almost like, it's like a train or a bus that you kind of like have to hold on to, knowing the driver is changing while we're driving. So that you kind of have to say, okay, we need to jump in to keep the momentum going, but not go off the rail. That's how I feel at the moment, given the context. I don't know if people know about the news, but I do personally say there are opportunities in big changes, given that you can still shape the new future, new structure. Yeah, but it is hard, especially if or people are in doubt with the new changes. So there is something to be done to collaborate in a way that can build trust. That's how I feel at the moment. And I do want to say that this workshop is in time for a lot of questions from many schools. Thank you.
And thank you for that comment and for sharing. And it does speak to that part of it, right? Where there's so much happening and it feels overwhelming. So it's about the uncertainty that we spoke to before. So the encouragement is to take the time to look at where can I focus my energy in making sure that I'm okay for where I can influence and what I can do. And it sounds like one of those, cliche questions that we ask, but it's worth it to take the time first to just stop and understand what are the pieces of this that I can control, and the pieces that I cannot control, what will my so it's about planting ourselves in moments of uncertainty.
Sophia, we're not hearing you properly.
Don't understand. Okay, what about now? The microphone is there. I'm not sure. Can you hear me any better now?
It sounds like you're talking inside a tin can now.
Okay, I'm not sure why. There's nothing on my end.
Michelle, did you hear this the change in Sophia, or is it just on my end?
No, I did hear a slight change.
Okay.
Sophia, are you still with us?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
We can. It has slightly shifted, but we can still hear you. So why don't we go to the next question and keep moving? And hopefully your technology will stay with us. Margaret, would you go to the next slide so Sophia is able to facilitate that and then
Yep,
go
I've
to the
moved.
next one?
Yep, I've moved to it.
No, go to the next one.
Oh, okay.
I'm not seeing here. I've lost you. Can you hear me?
No, we're hearing you.
Hello?
Hi, Sophia, can you hear me? I think she's having technical difficulties.
I believe she's on the other parts of the country. So I'm thinking maybe she's now having some technical difficulty.
Oh, I see her picture back.
Hello? Are you able to hear me?
We
Yes.
can now. Yes.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm not sure what's happening here. My apologies for that double-edged sword of technology. But for the final part of this, I want to say, and I've said a lot during the first part of this, but I'm just talking about managing through these times and the focus on self. I think it was so finished, like it's like a train coming in, we don't know. The focus really does then come down to being able to tune into self and saying, what do I need? And going through those practices and taking care of self so that you can pace yourself, because pace matters a whole lot as we're going through moments of uncertainty to ensure that we're staying filled. And so I would like to invite you, there are a number of resources that we have left. If you could actually just share them, you can go to the website and there are resources there that invites you to go through and take the time and the space that you need in looking at the place that you're in right now and how you move yourself through that. How are you going to be responding to the things that matter? How do you respond to when, like we said, it's like there is so much. There are some practices there that you can engage in to give yourself the time and the space you need in order to show up and continue to do meaningful and impactful work. So it's actually looking at how am I responding to others, but what it is that I need in terms of my boundaries and the tools and the practices that I need to engage in order to get through this time and come on the other side of this pole while still being effective and impactful in maneuvering our way through. So if you could share, we shared some of the slides, and just sharing, whether you put it in the chat, with just what stood out for you as a practice, what you would find helpful or what you would find challenging with this and would appreciate more of. And then to please go to the site and download those tools, reflect on them, and I invite you to engage, to reach out and to continue this conversation. There are teas that you were able to have compliments of the TDSB where we want you to continue this conversation. Don't just keep it in. Share with others. So invite others to the table. Pull up a chair. What are you thinking on this? How are you navigating this space? Where are you at? And so in hearing from others and being able to share what we're thinking, it will make a difference in how we can show up as our best selves and intact as we maneuver change and our challenges.
And on that note, Sophia, we would like to say thank you so much for joining us. There are so many gems that you have shared with us this evening. I was busy taking notes like I usually do. And I believe Nicole said it well. I believe this talk is timely. Your messaging is timely. There is no doubt that in education, parents and caregivers across our district are expressing, sharing significant periods of change. And I'm certainly hoping that those who joined us this evening and those who tune into the video, we've recorded this session. It will be posted on the PCO's YouTube page until the end of August. So we encourage you to watch it again to get the early gems, but also encourage you to log in, get the tools that Sophia is presenting to you, because we're hoping you'll use those tools to continue the conversation in your school council, continue the conversation in your community, continue the conversation at home with you, your friends, your children, because it is the conversation that also can support self-care and move the needle on these issues. And one of my favorite gems this evening that I'm going to take with me is destabilization is information. I love that. I'm going to be reflecting on that one for some time. And I certainly hope there was a gem that you took this evening that you'll continue the conversation with. So thank you for staying with us. Thank you for giving us your evening with the conversation series. Thank you again, Sophia, for that key messaging. Thank you, Margaret, for always being there, supports behind the scenes, keeping us moving. And I wish every one of you a wonderful evening. Now you can go enjoy your children and supper, whatever you have left to do. Have a great evening, everyone.
Thank you.